and other influencers will invoke Erika as the reason that it's not appropriate to ask questions. It's just not appropriate while Erika is still mourning for you guys to ask any questions. And I'm just going to come back at you with some common sense. What sort of widow wouldn't want people to investigate?
Candace Owens didn't just mention Erika Kirk. She dropped her name like a bomb that shook the entire conservative circle. People froze when they realized this wasn't just another social media jab. This was personal. At first, everyone thought it was just the usual post-chaos drama that follows anything tied to Charlie Kirk's legacy. But then, boom, Candace released a string of leaked text messages that flipped everything upside down. Suddenly, folks weren't just asking who's telling the truth, they were whispering who's working overtime to bury it. And here's where it got wild. Those texts hinted at something way bigger than a misunderstanding. We're talking about powerful donors pulling strings behind the scenes, hidden deals, and a money trail that suddenly didn't look so clean anymore. People who once swore Turning Point was all about transparency started looking real uncomfortable. Then Candace asked the question that stopped everyone in their tracks. What would a normal widow want in this situation? That one hit deep. The conversation instantly shifted. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about emotion, truth, and motive. For months, insiders had used Erika's grief as a shield, saying it was inappropriate to ask questions while she was mourning. But Candace wasn't buying that because honestly, what kind of widow wouldn't want the truth about what really happened to her husband? That question cracked everything open. Suddenly, this story wasn't just about loyalty or politics, and it was about control, power, and who really gets to shape Charlie Kirk's legacy. Everyone expected Erika to finally break her silence, maybe even come forward with answers that could stop all the speculation once and for all.
Here's that the widow Kirk may have your home address. Thousands of these letters were sent out threatening unleashed power. They are activists. They are no one who ever signed up to be on a mailing list for Turning Point USA, targeted mailing list that she either purchased or maybe was stolen for her. So then were they sent out as a threat to kind of like show that Turning Point has your home address? I don't know. Maybe somebody should look.
Well, until I marry J.D. Vance, we will not let the light he lit go out. Okay, what else is here? I'm not going to show you this part. Personal reply. Oh, geez, they're asking for donations. They're asking for money. Yeah, no. Good luck with that.
Instead of calming things down, Erika's silence only made the doubts louder, almost deafening. People kept asking, why stay quiet when someone like Candace Owens dared to speak what everyone else was too scared to say? And every time Candace dropped another question, the cracks around Charlie's final months got even wider. As those leaked messages started spreading like wildfire, the whispers turned into a storm. Stories about backstage deals, sponsors throwing their weight around, and the quiet panic inside TPUSA started surfacing. That's when everyone realized something huge. The drama didn't end with Charlie's passing. It started there. The first leak wasn't the end, it was the spark that lit a much bigger fire, and people could feel it building with every new revelation. Before all this, Charlie Kirk was seen as unshakable, the ultimate powerhouse behind his movement. He controlled the stage, the message, the brand. Every move seemed perfectly calculated, but the leaked texts painted a completely different picture, one that shocked even his biggest supporters. Behind the polished speeches and confident smile, Charlie was under serious pressure. Candace's messages hinted at major donors pulling some extreme moves, not just quietly stepping back, but giving him ultimatums. Millions of dollars suddenly came with strings attached, and those strings could pull down an entire organization overnight. Charlie was trapped in the middle. One side was the movement he built with his own hands, and on the other side were the people with money and influence who wanted control more than they cared about the message. This wasn't just about disagreement, and it was about power, the kind that hides behind closed doors and late-night phone calls. The kind that whispers warnings only a few people ever get to hear.
Unpopular opinion that I will get raked over the coals for in my life. Now, mind you, this has nothing to do with who she was married to, her political affiliation. I didn't even know her, who she was before any of this. I am an empath and I have worked in mental health for decades. I have worked one-on-one with human beings for decades, and I can read through anybody. I didn't say anything when everything happened. I kind of just sat back and I watched. And
Out in public, Charlie looked like he ran TPUSA with an iron grip, but in reality, those messages suggested powerful hands were pulling at the strings behind the curtain. And the thought that Charlie might have been silently battling all that pressure while smiling in front of cameras, that's what made Candace's words hit so hard. Because if he was dealing with that much while he was alive, what would happen once he was gone and no longer there to protect himself and or his legacy? That's exactly where Erika Kirk steps in. Not quietly, not gently, but right into the center of that storm. And ever since that moment, people haven't stopped wondering just how much she really knew and how far she's willing to go to keep certain things from ever being exposed. When Erika stepped into Charlie's shoes, everyone expected a grieving widow trying to keep things steady, holding a fragile organization together during a storm. But the second she took charge, something felt off. Instead of bringing calm, her presence raised even more questions no one had dared to ask before. And as Candace Owens kept talking, Erika's silence started to feel less like heartbreak and more like strategy. People couldn't shake the thought. Was this really mourning, or was this about control? Candace didn't waste time sugarcoating anything. She aimed right at the heart of it, asking, why wouldn't a widow want to come clean about what really happened in her husband's final months? That question hit hard. It divided the entire community. Some fans rushed to defend Erika, saying Candace had gone too far, but others couldn't ignore how Erika always dodged details whenever the topic came up.
Facial expressions. It is unreal to the point where it's creepy. Like, it's creepy. I thought it was creepy and weird on me when you're worth $12 million. But now, even that aside, mind you, my fiance did not even know who she was. I didn't say a word, and I showed him a video clip, and he just looked at me like, what is this? And laughed.
Behind the curtain, staffers whispered about chaos brewing, a power vacuum forming fast after Charlie's passing. And guess who filled it almost instantly? Erika. She moved into leadership faster than anyone could have predicted, surrounded by major donors, growing influence, and public sympathy that gave her an edge no one saw coming. Overnight, she went from grieving widow to the woman in charge, and that's when everything changed. But that move also painted a target on her back. Owens was convinced that someone, maybe even Erika, was trying to rewrite Charlie's final chapter, leaving out parts that didn't fit the new story being built. The more Erika tried to stand tall and defend her role, the more cracks started showing around TPUSA itself. It didn't feel like just grief anymore. Something deeper was surfacing, something that had been quietly hidden for a long time. And then, boom, the leaked messages spread everywhere. They weren't vague or easy to twist. They were emotional, raw, and painfully real. You could feel Charlie's exhaustion in every word. Frustration mixed with disappointment, like someone who had been backed into a corner by the very people he thought were on his side. The real shocker came when a huge donor suddenly pulled out, not quietly, not politely, but with a list of conditions that sounded more like threats than business decisions. Charlie wasn't just facing pressure, he was facing ultimatums tied directly to money, influence, and alliances that no one had ever heard about before. And when Candace dropped those receipts, she didn't just tell a sad story, she blew open a hidden system of pressure that only a handful of insiders ever knew existed.
Every day that goes on, it feels to me, so criticisms pertaining to anything at Turning Point USA that are being directed at Erika are fair. Obviously, they are fair. That their emotionality is not meeting the moment of violence that we all witnessed. But it just so happened that Charlie Kirk kept notebooks and diaries. He was so featuring who he wanted to take over for the organization.
The reaction from TPUSA didn't help either. Instead of denying the messages, they admitted they were real, but tried to calm things by saying they were taken out of context. That only made people more suspicious. Because seriously, what kind of context could make those texts sound okay? And even stranger, why was Erika the one leading the push to say the leaks were misleading instead of just answering the obvious question, what was really happening behind the scenes with Charlie? The leak didn't just cause gossip. It ripped open a wound that had been there long before Charlie passed. It exposed something bigger than anyone imagined, the kind of problem that money and PR statements can't fix. Once people connected the dots and realized finances were at the center of it all, the tone completely changed. This wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about control, power, and the truth that had been buried under years of carefully crafted image building. And now that Owens had cracked that surface, there was no going back. People wanted answers, and the pressure on Erika was only getting heavier by the day. At this point, it wasn't just about Candace Owens versus Erika Kirk anymore. This was about control. Who really handled the multi-million-dollar cash flow? Who pulled the strings behind Charlie's biggest decisions? And most importantly, who gained the most the moment he was gone? Right there, standing in the middle of that tangled web of power and money, was Erika Kirk. What really grabbed the public's attention wasn't just her position, it was how fast she tried to shut down any talk about money. Every time someone brought up the topic of withdrawn funding, Erika would steer the conversation somewhere else. Grief, unity, emotions, anything to move attention away from the obvious financial pressure Charlie had been under.
Nothing in Charlie's life is real. It's just something that formalized that succession plan outside of like a diary. But no, he wanted to put it in these notebooks. And then the plan was to guilt us, I think, to try to haunt us. Yeah, I'm putting the fire here right at the feet of Turning Point because I am disgusted. I am genuinely disgusted. I am looking around and wondering whether Charlie's entire life was the Truman Show to install a new ruler who the king would have never approved of.
But come on, big sponsors don't just vanish without a sound. A multi-million-dollar backer doesn't just walk away overnight unless something serious is going on behind the curtain. Something so intense that it forces an entire organization to shift direction in a matter of days. Candace Owens knew that. And instead of backing off, she kept pushing harder. Every time she mentioned the funding, TPUSA's responses got sharper, louder, and more defensive. The kind of tone that screams, "You're getting too close to something we don't want out there." It wasn't about some small misunderstanding. It was about a pressure point the insiders clearly wanted buried. Because if what Owens exposed about those donors is even halfway true, then Erika didn't just take over a grieving man's organization. She walked straight into a financial storm that even Charlie struggled to handle while he was alive. And that raised a brutal question. Was Erika fighting to protect Charlie's legacy or the money that came with it? That's where things got even darker because this story stopped being only about finances. A deeper, more dangerous layer started to crack open. Ideology. The kind of ideological war that could split a movement in half. Charlie's private messages hinted at a different kind of pressure, like not just money, but beliefs. It wasn't about simple disagreements. It was about powerful people trying to pull him in opposite directions, forcing him to pick sides on one of the most explosive issues in modern politics. Behind the polished speeches and the smiling public image, there was turmoil, the kind that no press release or staged photo could hide. And as those messages began to surface, it became clear that Charlie hadn't just been balancing donors and influence. He'd been trapped in a tug of war between powerful forces fighting to reshape the entire movement.
The other day I posted a video of me reading this ridiculous letter I received from the desk of Erika Kirk at Turning Point. And I've thought about it and I decided, they're not getting money from me. But you know what? They did give me a return address envelope. Didn't give me paid postage, but that's beside the point. So I decided, you know what? I will send something back. I'm going to send my own letter back, along with, just a little bit of photo and a little bit of glitter for some fun. But I just wanted to read to you what I decided to send back from the desk of a former Christian. Dear Erika Kirk, I am writing to ask...
Charlie's private messages didn't just reveal stress, they exposed the real battle he was fighting. His comments about foreign policy, his shifting tone on global alliances, and his thoughts about how the conservative movement was changing, all of it painted a picture of a man trapped between loyalty and survival. According to the leaks, Charlie wasn't just worried about losing donors. He was under real pressure to tone down or even completely change his views to satisfy a few very powerful circles. And when he refused to bend, the financial backlash hit fast and hard. The same backers who once praised him for being fearless suddenly turned cold when his courage no longer worked in their favor. That's when things around Erika started looking strange. Instead of acknowledging that Charlie had been caught in a brutal storm of politics and expectations, she doubled down, claiming Candace Owens was twisting the truth. But that denial only made everything messier. Because if those leaked messages were real, and the organization already admitted they were, then why deny the obvious signs of pressure? Why act like Charlie wasn't exhausted when his own words showed how drained and cornered he felt? It didn't make sense, and Owens wasn't letting that go unnoticed. She believed Erika's silence wasn't about honoring Charlie's memory, it was about protecting alliances that his honesty might have threatened. To Candace, the cover-up was never about emotions, it was about influence and keeping powerful people comfortable. As the puzzle pieces started to fit together, the story got darker and more tangled. If money, influence, and ideology were dividing Charlie while he was alive, imagine the chaos once he was gone. Who would take advantage of that confusion? Who would rise the fastest when the one man holding it all together suddenly wasn't there anymore? People had expected grief, sure, even some public drama, but what came next was way beyond that.
Especially as the political party you've aligned yourself with continues to prolong the government shutdown. To my surprise, instead of addressing that suffering, the letter you sent was asking us for money. You're asking for money when you yourself inherited millions after your husband's passing. How can you do this when people are struggling to survive? Did you stop and ask yourself, what would Jesus do? And did you really conclude that he would want you to raise more money to spread Christian nationalism, the critical legacy you followed Jesus' example, and start flipping some tables? Such a bad name. People like you are why so many of us have left the church.
Owens was suggesting that Charlie's passing didn't just leave emotional pain, it created a power vacuum inside TPUSA. And once that vacuum opened, people started shifting positions overnight, stepping into roles they had never held before, claiming authority they never had while Charlie was still alive. The balance he'd built so carefully began to crumble. And every move Erika made only fueled the growing suspicion that this was about more than grief. It was about control. And who would get to rewrite the legacy he left behind? Once the dust started settling, people expected Erika to finally clear the air and to speak openly about the leaks, the donors, and Charlie's rumored internal struggles. But instead, she went quiet again. Not just a pause, full silence as if she'd vanished from the conversation completely. And that silence only made things louder. The questions started stacking up like never before. Behind the scenes, insiders whispered that Erika was working overtime to keep certain people happy, the same people who had pressured Charlie while he was alive. Suddenly, it wasn't just about what Erika was doing publicly, but who she was talking to privately. Reports surfaced that she was attending closed-door meetings with select donors and advisors, trying to stabilize things, but the timing of it all raised eyebrows. How could anyone focus on damage control before addressing the truth that caused the damage in the first place? That's what had everyone talking. People close to the situation claimed that Erika was spending more time on strategy than on transparency, and that her new role came with more leverage than anyone ever expected her to have. And when the organization released a carefully worded statement about moving forward, it only added fuel to the fire. Because not once did it mention Charlie's internal battles or the financial tension he faced.
If you truly want to save Turning Point, then make it one by actually turning toward the teachings of Christ. Do what he commanded, live what he died for, because right now, all I see are modern-day Pharisee Christian nationalists who would likely be front-row spectators at the crucifixion if Jesus returned today. So if you want to help save America from the very evil consuming it, try this. Send letters to local pantries, as well as do so yourself. Be doing, and I'm equally certain he would not be condoning a millionaire asking struggling P.S. Please don't send me a wedding announcement for you and JD Vance. Save the postage. Sincerely.
Meanwhile, Candace kept digging. She wasn't just relying on the leaks anymore. She was talking to people who had worked directly with Charlie. One former staff member reportedly told her that Charlie had confided in them just weeks before his passing, saying he felt boxed in and surrounded by expectations he could never meet. Those words hit people hard. They didn't sound like a man at peace. They sounded like someone under immense pressure trying to hold everything together while it was falling apart behind the curtain. Owens didn't hold back. She went on her show and said flat out that the silence coming from Erika and TPUSA wasn't normal. It was intentional. She said, "When people with power go quiet after a scandal, that's not grief, that's management." That line exploded online. Within hours, clips were everywhere and comments poured in, accusing Erika of turning a tragedy into a rebranding mission. At the same time, rumors spread that internal emails and financial reports might exist showing where certain donor funds were redirected after Charlie's passing. Nothing had been publicly confirmed, but the whispers were getting too loud to ignore. And that's when it hit people. This wasn't just a story about loss anymore. This was about who was cashing in on what came after. Erika's next public appearance didn't help her case. She spoke at a fundraiser meant to honor Charlie's legacy, but what caught attention wasn't her speech, it was her tone. Viewers said she looked rehearsed, controlled, even cold. One viral comment said, "It felt like a presentation, not a tribute." And others noticed that she carefully avoided mentioning Candace Owens or any of the controversies surrounding the leaks. That's when the audience realized something was off. If everything was fine, why did the air feel so tense every time Erika appeared? Why did her body language scream defense when no one had asked her a question yet? And most importantly, why did every public statement from her team sound more like damage control than genuine grief? By now, people weren't just watching the drama, they were invested. The once loyal crowd that had stood by Charlie was starting to split. Some stood with Erika, saying she was doing her best under impossible pressure, but others, they were convinced she was holding on to power that wasn't hers to claim. And through it all, Candace Owens kept pressing forward, teasing that there was more coming. She hinted at new files, more testimonies, and deeper connections between Erika's decisions and certain top-tier backers. If even half of what she was suggesting turned out to be true, the fallout could completely reshape how people saw the organization and everyone tied to it. By this point, one thing was certain. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about a storm that was still building, one that could expose everything Charlie had worked for and everything Erika was fighting to protect. Erika's rise to the top looked flawless from the outside, almost too flawless. Even people inside the organization said it felt like everything had been mapped out long before Charlie was gone, like a crown already sitting on the table waiting for her head. That eerie sense of pre-planning made a lot of staff members nervous. How did someone who was never seen leading the movement suddenly become its voice, its shield, and its final decision maker overnight? Every time someone brought up internal tension or asked about the shift in leadership, the response was always the same: vague statements about unity and continuing Charlie's mission. But Candace Owens wasn't buying it. She believed someone was moving pieces behind the scenes, consolidating power while emotions were still raw and grief kept people distracted. And the more Erika dodged direct questions on about the donors, the leaks, and the pressure Charlie faced, the more suspicion built up. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't say. Her silence wasn't peaceful. Boy, it was heavy. Behind that silence were shifting alliances, uncertain loyalties, and staffers whispering that they no longer knew who they were really working for. Some insiders claimed Erika was simply trying to stabilize chaos, holding things together before the movement fell apart completely. But others whispered that she wasn't just stabilizing, she was seizing control, and she was doing it faster than anyone thought possible. The very same people who once admired her quiet strength started wondering if that silence was actually a strategy. Just when people thought Candace Owens had pushed things as far as they could go, the story flipped again. The leaks, the donor drama, the ideological tug of war, and Erika's well-timed silences all came crashing together in a storm no one could stop. What had started as a debate over transparency was now something much bigger, a full-blown power struggle. And right in the middle of it all sat the question that no one could ignore anymore. Why didn't Erika want these conversations happening in the first place? Because whether Candace Owens was right or wrong, whether her delivery was bold or messy, one fact couldn't be denied: she'd exposed a crack in the foundation. What the world thought was a perfectly unified movement now looked divided, uncertain, and led by someone under way more pressure than anyone realized. Charlie's final words, those messages he left behind, painted the picture of a man torn between loyalty and survival, between what he believed in and the people who financed those beliefs. He was stuck between conviction and compliance, and when he was gone, those tensions didn't disappear, they exploded. Owens didn't create the chaos, she revealed it, and Erika's silence, that silence made people ask the one question that still hasn't been answered: what exactly is she trying to protect? Was she shielding Charlie's legacy or the powerful machine that operated in his name? Because when you strip away the headlines and the speculation, it becomes clear this was never just about money. It was about influence, about control, about who gets to decide what story gets told and whose version of Charlie's last chapter becomes official history. Owens wanted to drag that truth into the light for everyone to see, while Erika seemed determined to keep it buried deep in the dark. And now, the entire conservative community finds itself trapped between those two worlds, one demanding answers and the other refusing to speak. So the question hanging in the air isn't who's right anymore. It's who benefits from the silence, because when the direction of a whole movement is decided behind closed doors and those closest to the truth refuse to come forward, it stops being a story about politics. It becomes a story about power, who owns it, who shapes it, and who dares to keep it for themselves. And as more people start digging, one truth becomes harder and harder to ignore. Whatever really happened, it won't stay hidden forever. The internet's watching, the public's asking questions, and more eyes are on Erika than ever before. According to public sources, this story continues to gain massive traction online, sparking intense debates and deep curiosity about what really went down behind the scenes. We report what's trending, what's public, and what's shaping conversations, always for commentary and entertainment purposes only. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If this story had you hooked, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments below, because every opinion helps uncover more of the truth. And trust me, this one's far from over.